Welcome to Change on the Brain, where we dive deep into the neuroscience and psychology research and real-world case studies so that you can build effective practice on solid science and real-world expertise. I'd like to invite you on the journey to discovery with me, to the mechanics of expertise. For the next few weeks, I'll be diving deep into three related areas: the neuroscience of expertise and neuroplasticity, the psychology of the growth mindset, and the psychology research into the development of expertise. So this video is a little different to my last one. The last one was the capstone on years of research, followed by 2 months of writing the TEDx talk on the power of changing your mindset from a stress is debilitating to a stress is enhancing mindset. Now this video is actually the beginning of a journey that I'm inviting you to join me on. I'll lay out my map for you here. It's a map where I know some of the territory because I've been researching it for a while and I've mapped it out. Some. But there are a bunch of areas where it's just mist and monsters. You know those old maps where they knew some of the stuff, but for some areas it was just sea monsters and fog? Now, I've got hunches and questions, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments, which will help me direct my research. If you want to come with me on the journey, take a look at the link in the description of the talk for the podcast of the videos in order. So here's a rough map of the terrain. Let me tell you my hunches and my questions first. So I read Anders Ericsson's excellent book, Peak. Now, Anders Ericsson was a psychologist who researched how experts acquire top-level expertise. And if you've ever heard of the 10,000-hour rule, which was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, then you've met Anders Ericsson's work. He looked at surgeons, chess players, memorizers, violin players, fighter pilots, and he found that part of the open secret is that they practice in a particular way. Now, it's an open secret in that they practice with teachers who've been teaching this way for a long time, sometimes hundreds of years. And it's a little like the apprentice-master model of expertise. An apprentice learns from a master, initially by copying exactly what the master shows them, until they've mastered the tools and themselves. And then they begin to break the rules. And eventually, they abandon the rules entirely and respond only to the situation. And what I find fascinating is that modern neuroscience has been looking deeper into the brains of experts to see if their brains actually work any differently to amateurs. So here are some of my key questions at this stage. What makes expertise? What changes in the brain when people go from amateur to expert? And then what have we learned about how to go from amateur to expert? And especially the question of conscious control. Are experts basically shifting large sections of their performance into their automatic systems and then using only their conscious control to respond to the demands of the situation? And if that's the case, then how do you best do that? And this is the idea of Anders Ericsson in that book Peak, that this is what experts do. They have created what he calls mental representations, which are instantly accessible neural patterns which can be used and deployed by the expert, that are so well integrated with your knowledge that they're connected to your emotions, and they give you the ability to recognize certain situations and then use the right skill for that situation without too much conscious thought. And this is the substance of what we call intuition. And the reason that experts use this special kind of practice that he calls deliberate practice in the book is that it creates those mental representations. A simple example he gives in the book is rock climbers. So when a rock climber sees a particular kind of hold, he recognizes that hold category intuitively, and his fingers are already forming themselves into the ideal grip for that hold. So how about data? I'd like to look at different types of data to get to the answer to these questions. So what kind of data can we look at? What studies have been done that show this? What real-life stories show it too? Because I think you need both. You need to see it in the lab, you need to see it at a mechanistic level, And then you need to see it working out there in the messy real world. And so I think you've got to look at a range of data. And I see different types of evidence as valid. So number one, you've got your scientific studies, which I love and are really valuable. But honestly, there's limitations to what you can discover in a lab. And then you've got your individual real-world success stories. Now these are valuable because that individual has figured out what really works in the precise, messy real world. And you can see the proof in the pudding by seeing their proven success. But the problem is, you don't know if what they say they did is really the cause of the success that they had. So I like to look at both of them and then look for the overlap. Because if the lab studies are saying the same thing as the elite performer, which is saying the same thing as the coach of the elite performer, then I think we're onto something. So I have some hunches. I've done some research, but I never really know what I'm going to find. And I'd like to invite you into the journey. So I'll publish different videos over the next couple of months from the journey. And I wanted to give you an idea of what they are so that you can follow along. So here's the types of episodes on the channel in the next few months. The first type of video is AI-generated research podcasts. I research the key studies that have been done in psychology and neuroscience of expertise, which will give me somewhere between 50 and 100 studies. So I'll generate an overview podcast of the 50 to 100 or so studies. And the links to the NotebookLM notebooks are always in the descriptions so that you can go and read the findings for yourself in the studies. Then, of course, please ask your questions in the chat in the notebook to see if those studies really contain those insights. And then, from those overviews, I'll pick out and do individual episodes, also AI generated, so there's 10-minute explainers and then long episodes on individual studies. Then I'll do videos myself, like this one on discoveries along the way. Then I'll pull it together at the end with a summary video. So I invite you to join in the journey in the comments. If you love the adventure of learning, I welcome your thoughts and your questions. So here's what I'll be looking at: studies, books, real-world case studies. And so for now, here's a sketch of what I'll be looking at. I'll be looking at the studies which have been done on the growth mindset and the impact on performance, looking at the work of Carol Dweck and David Yeager. I'll also be looking at studies on the neuroscience of expertise, with special emphasis on both physical mastery, like athletes, but also studies of cognitive experts, like chess players, simultaneous translators. And then the people who bridge the gap between the two, which is surgeons. I'll be reading Roger Kneebone's Expert book, who's head of surgeon development at Imperial College London, one of the best universities in the UK. He spent years learning from different kinds of experts, from surgeons to musicians to tailors, fighter pilots, and even taxidermists, to discover the common elements in the process of developing expert performance. So for the real-world case studies, I'll be looking at basketball. I'll also be reading Tim Grover's book, Relentless. He was the sports enhancement coach for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And he writes about what it takes to train to be an elite athlete. I'll also be watching The Last Dance from Netflix on the Chicago Bulls as a kind of real-world case study. For the psychology of expertise, I'll be looking at a couple of people. I'll be drawing pretty heavily from Peak by Anders Ericsson, which I would totally recommend reading. It is a brilliant description from a psychologist who studied expertise for decades. And finally, I'll be putting the ideas into practice by producing YouTube videos for this channel, scripting them, recording them, editing them, which is a mission. So I won't be just researching academically, I plan to leave some blood and sweat on the tracks. So, join me. Hey!